Good evening and welcome to Reference Point. I'm your host, Dave Kocharhook. And with me this evening are two gentlemen representing emergency response information. We're going to talk tonight about a few things that I think are really important here in the Bay Area, and that is, how do we prepare ourselves for that next situation where we have to take care of ourselves, our families, our area, because there's some type of an emergency. And so I'm going to introduce Lynn Brown. Lynn is with the Mountain View Fire Department. He's in the Office of Emergency Services there. And also Mark Liao. And Mark is with the American Red Cross in the Palo Alto chapter of the Red Cross. Gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening.
Thanks for having me here, Dave.
We're really excited about what we're going to talk about today because, a few weeks past, we had a nice little earthquake in the area here. You know, not a huge one. What was it, 5.3 or 5.4, something like that? But there are folks who are in our area now that have never experienced anything quite like that before, right? Kids that anyone that was born after 1989 really hasn't had anything that severe happen here. And a lot of people just sort of forget what it's all about. And what we wanted to talk about tonight is what it is that people should be doing in order to take care of themselves in case there's an emergency situation. So what I wanted to do is start out asking you a question, Lynn.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about what it is that the Office of Emergency Services in Mountain View does. I'm sure we'll extrapolate to other areas, but let's talk about Mountain View since that's where you are.
Okay, well, here in the city of Mountain View, our Office of Emergency Services, as you mentioned, is in the fire department. And my job is just basically to be sure that everyone in the city of Mountain View, either a resident, a business, a citizen, a school, anyone that lives or works here, is prepared for whatever bad thing might happen. Whether it's a fire, a flood, an earthquake, a terrorist attack, or a plague of locusts, it's my job to be sure that folks are ready to respond to that. They have the things they need and have the knowledge to be able to respond to that in a good way. So
we want the individuals to have enough information and level of skill to be able to handle the situation that comes up. Is that generally the...
Absolutely, and it's easy to get complacent. In some areas, I'm from Florida originally, and in Florida our big issue there is hurricanes. So you've got a tropical depression, tropical storm, now it's a hurricane, now it's going to land here within a few days.
Right.
Here in California you get 30 years notice of a major earthquake, but 30 years is a long time, so people don't really prepare for that. So the thing I'd like to emphasize is it can be at any time. While we're doing this interview tonight we could have an earthquake, and
Sure.
you need to be prepared for that. It can happen at any time.
Cool. So now, how do you go about doing that? How do you get this information to people so that they become cognizant of what they ought to be doing?
Well, we try to reach out in as many ways as possible. If you go to the City of Mountain View website at www.mountainview.gov, we have a lot of information about preparedness on there. I try to come out and do shows like yours, Dave, whenever possible. Thank you for having us out tonight to spread the word. And also we do talks. We talk to, obviously, clubs, Kiwanis, Rotary, schools, churches, neighborhood groups. Pretty much anyone that will have us, I'll be happy to go out and talk to them and try to reach out as much as we can to get folks better prepared.
And Mark, the Red Cross does similar things, do they not, in terms of information, that seminars, whatever you want to call it, workshops, public awareness type of seminars to help people come to understand what they should do? Is that a fair statement?
That's correct. We have trained community disaster educators, which we send out into the community to do what Lynn does. But we've also tried to explore rather innovative ways of service delivery, including on our website, people can view a disaster presentation online in the comfort of their own home, and they don't have to necessarily attend a presentation physically.
Okay, great. Now, you were telling me about a program that is in Mountain View, and I understand, Mark, you can talk about the one in Palo Alto in a minute, but I understand that there's a program in Mountain View that is intended to I don't know, certify people in some level of competence when it comes to handling situations.
That's correct. We have a program called CERT, Community Emergency Response Team Training. And it's a 20-hour course. We offer it free to anyone that lives or works here in the city of Mountain View. And we offer, I think, fairly comprehensive training on folks. We do basic preparedness, disaster medical operations, which is very different than standard first aid, which you do until the ambulance gets there.
Mm-hmm.
We teach from the perspective the ambulance isn't coming. So how do you deal with that? We do light search and rescue, how to search a building properly, know how to search it. We do fire suppression, team organization, disaster preparedness, and we also do a module on disaster psychology, how people may react, critical incident stress, things of that nature.
That's an important one.
Yes, it is. It's psychological as well as physical well-being. We try to encourage people to be ready for. And also we do a module called CERT and Terrorism, which teaches people how to respond in the event should there be a terrorist attack in this area.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. And then, Mark, in addition to being a volunteer for the Red Cross, you actually work for the Palo Alto Fire Department as well. Is that correct?
That's correct. And the City of Palo Alto, through the Office of Emergency Services, offers a similar program called PANDA, which is Palo Alto Neighborhood Disaster Activities. And I think a lot of people would be very interested to know that throughout the entire Bay Area, each community probably has their own CERT or PANDA-like program, and they just need to find out about it through their local police or fire department. Okay,
well, let's talk about this just a little bit more, because there's, you mentioned a lot of different things. If there's a fire, if there's an earthquake, if there's some other kind of a situation, gas main blows up or whatever, where you get heavy rains and you get some flood situation in some of the lower lying areas. And so you're actually trying to give people a pretty broad spectrum of things that they need to know. And I think one of the things that's important for folks to consider is that when will some help arrive, I think, is something that people might not think about. I think the tendency is, if there's an emergency situation, you want to pick up the phone and call 911, and you hope that somebody's going to be there right away. And in a normal circumstance, that's pretty true, right?
Absolutely. Well, right in the city of Mountain View right now, we have 22 firefighters on duty, 5 stations, 22 firefighters to cover the entire city. If we have a major structure fire, our normal response is 3 engines, the truck, and the rescue. So we've taken most of our apparatus on one incident. So generally, if if someone had a problem right now, we called 911. I guarantee you, in 3 to 4 minutes, you'll have an engine, a police car, an ambulance, whatever we need. In a large-scale disaster, obviously you can't count on that. We're going to have more calls than we can handle. And that's why it's so important for citizens to be prepared, so they can prevent small things from becoming big things. If they know how to use a fire extinguisher, they can keep a small fire from becoming a large fire and potentially burning down their house.
Right. Prevent small things from becoming big things. That's a really great way of saying that. Yes, were we going to say something, Mark?
Well, the Red Cross also recommends people prepare for at least 3 days after a disaster. Some people say 72 hours, but 3 days is the minimum we suggest. Now, after Hurricane Katrina, the Red Cross has suggested that people prepare their kits to as long as perhaps even 2 weeks.
Wow.
So having a good disaster plan and a disaster kit is essential to making sure that you're ready.
People don't always think about this. I mean, I think we think about it when the earth moves, okay?
Right.
And in between times, that however many year period here in California, when we have something significant that occurs, we don't think about what should we do, how should we be prepared. I mean, we had those fires down in Southern California not too long ago. Did people have what they needed in order to take care of themselves or to get away safely? I don't know. So how do we get the message across? How do we get people to recognize that it is important to do this? I mean, there isn't anything like they tell you every time you change your clocks to change that 9-volt battery, okay? But there isn't anything as a reminder mechanism, is there, that says, go check your emergency kit. Make sure the food's been cycled through. Make sure we don't do that, do we?
Well, I think one of the keys, and you hit on very much the point, you have to take those moments of opportunity when something does happen, like a Hurricane Katrina or the firestorm down in Southern California. Their awareness have heightened at that point, and that's a teaching moment where you can reach out to people and let them know, hey, here's some things you can do. And I think psychologically it makes people, if they're better prepared, I think they're more easily able to accept that something may happen and they need to be able to deal with it. And I'll give you an example. We talked about water, and anyone that saw the videotape from Hurricane Katrina, the one thing those people wanted more than anything else was a drink of water. And storing water is a very important part of having supplies in your home. And I'll like show you just very quickly. I like to store water in a 5-gallon container. This is a very good size to store things in. Water weighs about 8 pounds a gallon. So if you've got that 55-gallon drum of water, it's pretty hard to move. And if you're storing water in a, don't store it in containers like this. It's not good for long-term storage. You need a heavier duty plastic. This stuff will tend to break down over time, and you may try to pick it up and open it. It may crumble in your hand, and then you don't have any water. And I agree with Mark. Our standard now, we used to follow the line and say 3 days, and I'm telling people 3 days is a bare minimum. How many days? Because we can all go a couple days without food. We've got some reserves. But without water, you're in a world of hurt pretty quickly.
Let's talk a little bit about the roles of the various agencies. As the fire department, what's its role as a first responder in types of situations? And I want to talk about what the Red Cross does, because we always see when there is a situation, okay, 24 tornado in Kansas or whatever, and you hear about the Red Cross did this or the Red Cross does that. And I want to have you tell us more about what the Red Cross does. But I think I want to start this with, what do the first responders do? What is their role? How do they deal with things? How do you determine what you're going to go to now versus, when you have a large scale situation? How do you triage this stuff?
Okay, and triage is exactly what we do. And so the basic role of the fire department is we have fire, rescue, and emergency medical services. Those are our major responsibilities. Put out fires, rescue people that are trapped, and provide emergency medical services. Okay. Now, ordinarily, we'll roll to any kind of incident. If you fall down and scrape your knee, we'll roll an engine out to take care of you. In a large-scale disaster, we have to look at life safety issues. So an extreme case, and I'm talking very extreme case, we would let an empty building that threatened no other buildings on one end of town burn while we responded to another building where people might be trapped or we might be able to help people. So that's an extreme case, but that's the kind of decision we would have to make, where we can do the most good for the most people in the shortest amount of time.
Okay, cool. So that's where your role comes in, fire and police first, or whatever. And then the Red Cross, where do they fit in the picture?
So under the National Response Plan, the American Red Cross is under what's called the Emergency Support Function. And so we typically open shelters to house people who have been displaced in a time of disaster, and also do casework with clients to determine what needs they have that need to be replaced. Okay. I think this surprises a lot of Americans, because when they see the Red Cross on TV, whether it be the Mexican Red Cross or the Kocharhook Mexicana, they see ambulance service, like what is essentially is a first responder service. And that's not what the American Red Cross does. Okay. It's helping people after disaster move on.
Okay, so it's not like your people are dispatched on the spot when an incident occurs. You're coming in after the fact to offer levels of support to the folks who have been displaced or who have had been affected in some way by the occurrence.
That's correct.
Okay.
And also, even in a non-disaster setting, we work very closely with the American Red Cross. We had a structure fire, an apartment fire here in Mountain View about 2 years ago, and 47 people were displaced, left homeless as a result of that fire. And the Red Cross was on the job, turned up very quickly, and their disaster assistance teams was able to help us find a place for those folks to stay.
Wow, that's great. So tell me a little bit, Mark, you and I were talking at one point about if there is a large-scale situation, what are the steps that occur? Because it's not like you don't have people running around out there that immediately know where to go and what to do, right? You kind of have to figure out what's the order of magnitude of the task. What is it that you're going to be able to, how you're going to best be able to assist, and then you dispatch people on that basis. Is that pretty much correct?
That's correct. The way that we want our volunteers to function after a major incident is to first make sure that themselves and those around them are safe, and then determine whether or not their loved ones in the area are also safe. We don't want our volunteers coming to volunteer with us when their loved one could potentially be in trouble.
Sure.
We also take several hours to assess the situation before calling in our volunteers. And I think this is really important for any members of the general public who want to volunteer with the Red Cross. They need to get trained as disaster volunteers before the disaster, because we cannot handle a massive number of spontaneous volunteers that typically which we've seen has happened after Hurricane Katrina and 9/11.
Wow. I can see that. Yep. People say, I want to help, I want to help. So they come in and say, put me to work.
Exactly.
But they have no idea what to do, right?
Absolutely. And it kind of points out one of the very important things about having some training. In the Mexico City earthquake in 1986, about 400 people were rescued, not by professional, but by passersby, by volunteers, people that just jumped in and started moving things and helped and rescued those people. Unfortunately, about 100 of those rescuers lost their lives doing so. So you might say on the one hand, it's a pretty good ratio, 4 to 1, but if you're one of the ones or you're related to the one, that's not a very good ratio. Right. So one of the things we teach in CERT is how to be safe, how to assess a building, and sometimes we teach people it's too dangerous to go in there and knowing when to say no.
Right. You brought a couple things with you that tie into the CERT program, didn't you?
Yeah. One of the things we like to do, we have our, when you graduate the CERT program, you get the City of Mountain View CERT hard hat.
Very
and this
cool.
does a couple things for you, actually. It lets people know that you've been trained. Well, first, it offers protection for your head, obviously, so it's personal protective equipment. And it's also kind of a symbol of authority. It lets people know that you've had some training, that you know what to do in the event of a large-scale disaster, and hopefully they can direct other people. So we give them the hard hat. We also give folks, they get a vest. And again, this is identification. And MTV cert, it's not music television.
Oh, okay.
Every fire department in the state has a 3-letter designator, and ours happens to be MTV.
Okay.
We tried, like Palo Alto has Panda. We tried to do a cool acronym here in Mountain View. The M and the V made it really hard. So we went with MTV. So MTV cert. And again, our hope is that these 2 items will give people some authority, and their neighbors come out wondering what to do, how to do it. Then they say, hey, you know, Bob down the street, he took the class, he knows what to do. We also give everyone that graduates a pair of safety glasses so they can keep their eyes safe. And finally, a pair of sturdy leather gloves. The single most requested item for the 1986 earthquake in Mexico City was leather gloves.
Really?
Because people were getting their
trying
hands
to
in,
moving
stuff.
Stone and stuff like that. You cut yourself up big
Cut your
time.
hands up. So it's a very important thing to have. So be safe, try to help others, and keep them in a safe way also.
So let's talk a little bit more about the certification programs. In that somebody goes through the training, and maybe they did it a year ago or 2 years ago or whatever. Aren't there standards that keep changing? It's kind of a moving target, isn't it? So how do you encourage people to make sure that they are up to date on? And my wife's a registered nurse, and she was telling me the other day about the difference today versus several years ago, and what you really should do when you're administering CPR, for instance. So all these things keep changing; they're moving targets. So how do we get people to recognize you need to come in periodically and get recertified?
Right. Yeah, I'll talk about how we do it in Mountain View, and I'll let Mark talk about the Palo Alto version. But we offer refresher training 4 times a year, so people who have taken the course have a chance to come back and specifically practice those skills that they learned. We also encourage people to come back and just help out with the other classes. You know, just sit through the class again or help out on the field day so they get some more practice. We also do a county-wide exercise once a year. We have one coming up in January out at Moffett Field. And we invite participants from all the different programs in the county to come to an exercise and work together. And it works very well. You get people from Morgan Hill pairing with someone from Palo Alto, with Gilroy, so all around. So it's a good way to do it and keep them involved. And neighborhoods also, even without the city, some of them do their own drills as well.
Oh,
so there's a chance for them to practice as well.
Good. So how does the Red Cross handle that with its volunteers, Mark?
Well, for our disaster volunteers, every month we actually have a meeting at our Red Cross chapter that deals specifically with training people. And we also try to get involved with exercises, the last one of which was Golden Guardian in November. We also require that our members undergo first aid and CPR certification. Okay. So first aid is good for 3 years and CPR is good for 1 year. So they need to go through that in that time frame. And also we have our programs online that people can take, and because if it's online, it can be updated frequently from our national headquarters, so we can provide consistent service delivery throughout the entire nation.
Great. Both of you had mentioned to me at one point that if there is a situation that's outside of your immediate venue, that you do dispatch your people to assist in other communities, right?
Absolutely. We have a very good mutual aid plan here in the state of California, where if something happens in Mountain View, for example, and we need help, we can count on Sunnyvale, Palo Alto, County Fire, Moffett Field, sending their resources in to help us out. And so it's a very good system. A great example, as we saw in the firestorm down south earlier this year.
Sure.
Fire crews from Northern and Central California going down there to help out. So it's a pretty good system. And the danger is when we have a regional event and those cities are tied up with their own emergencies, they cannot send that help that we usually count on. I mentioned earlier, if we go to a second alarm, we need another 3 engines, another truck, another rescue. We don't have it. Generally, we can count on County Fire, Sunnyvale, Palo Alto, somebody to send it. If they're having emergencies as well, they can't send their help over here. So it's very important for everyone to be prepared, have some supplies, and know how to react in the event of a large-scale disaster.
All right. And go ahead.
And for the Red Cross, we have what's called the Disaster Service Human Resource Program, where we have a cadre of volunteers who are willing to go out on assignment throughout the entire nation. And as a number, before Hurricane Katrina made landfall, we actually had 2,000 volunteers already either on call or already moving towards that region even before it made landfall.
Wow, I didn't realize that. That's impressive.
And just one further point on volunteers for Katrina, when they were calling for volunteers, they specifically asked for CERT-trained volunteers to go out.
Sure.
Because people who've taken CERT training understand basic safety precautions, they understand the incident command system, and they fit in very nicely rather than having to start from scratch with someone. They've had some basic training, and they can begin to respond faster.
Very cool. Let's move into an area that I think, I forget which one of you mentioned it, but had to do with what you should have as an individual in the way of an emergency kit. And Mark, you brought something to share with us today, didn't you, that kind of give us some sense as to what should an individual have in their, and I can see this at multiple levels. There's your car, because you spend an awful lot of time in California, you spend it in your car. There's at your home, and then maybe at the office, because maybe you commute to and from work via Caltrain or something like that. So let's talk a little bit about what people should have at those different venues.
Well, I think when most people think of a disaster kit, they think of food, water, and shelter. But I would say that the one thing that's most important in anyone's disaster kit is actually a radio. And that's because after a major disaster, your telephone's not going to work. Your fax machine, if anyone uses fax anymore, is not going to work. Your TV, if the power's out, it's not going to work. The internet probably won't work, and your cell phones may be out too. The only way you're going to find out important information is through the radio. In Palo Alto, we recommend that people tune to 90.1 FM, which is the Stanford radio station, KZSU. I'm not sure if anyone listens to it other than if there was an emergency. But Lynn, you also have a similar radio station.
That's correct. We have an agreement with St. Francis High School here in Mountain View, and they have a commercial grade transmitter. They have their own radio station, and it's KSFH 89.7 FM. And we have a generator out there as well, so hopefully that'll be up and running in the event of large-scale disaster.
So we can broadcast information. People can get data as to what's going on and what they can and can't do, or should or shouldn't do. And then, of course, you were also telling me about shortwave, right?
Well, amateur radio, is an important part of our plan. We have a large number of amateur radio operators volunteer with us. We have their antennas on all our fire stations, and we teach our CERT folks to take care of themselves and their family, take care of the neighborhood, and then go to the fire station and either make a status report on what's happening there, or if you have a request for service, if you have a fire or an incident, let us know, and they can relay that directly to our Emergency Operations Center. So they're a great asset to us. Fantastic. And they are the ultimate backup communication system.
There's a lot of those guys around, which is great. And we've got about 4 minutes left in the show here, so I wanted to go back to the kit. What else should we have as individuals? So
most people think of things like food, and we do recommend when you buy food, maybe not necessarily disaster food, but food you actually eat, like canned food and granola bars and things like that. We have packaged water, but the water that we put in our disaster kits isn't enough to last people. We do recommend about 1 gallon of water per person per day. That's right, for at least 3 days. And also things like making sure that you have a flashlight and and other types of utility equipments like wrenches and medications. And what we don't recommend is candles, as it turns out, because people have a habit of knocking over candles and also thinking that it's a good idea to check for gas leaks using candles when that's not what we want.
No, I'm assuming that if I were to go to the website, either the Mountain View website or the Red Cross website here in Palo Alto, that recommendations for what you should have in your emergency kit here at your home or over in your office or to take with you in your car would be there.
Yeah.
And it was,
absolutely. On our website, we have an emergency preparedness guide that we mailed out to all residents a few months ago. But it's we have a PDF format of it there. On the website, a complete workbook of things you should store, things to think about, including your pets. We tend to think about our family members. You have to remember the pets. They're part of the family as well. So you need to. And
I think thoughts just came to mind. We're now here. It's December. It's getting cooler out there. You were telling me that you were planning on going up to ski in here sometime soon. So you might have something in your car that you would normally have for you, but if you're now going to be going up to the Sierras, that's a different combination of needs. So people ought to be thinking about this sort of stuff. And if you think about emergency preparedness, and I think prepared is the key term here. You're not planning for a problem, right? But you are making it more possible for yourself to survive through a challenge and to help other people in the process. I think that's key. Yeah?
Absolutely. We just saw about the 1-year anniversary, if you recall, the Kim family last year up in Oregon. They got lost in the snow, didn't really have any supplies, and it didn't, they saved part of the family. The father unfortunately passed away as a result of that. So particularly if you're driving in the snow, very important to have a signaling device, flares of some kind, and have enough food and water and blankets to take care of yourself.
Okay. So we got a radio, we got some water, we got some food. You mentioned flashlight. You mentioned, I imagine it would be reasonable to have a lighter or something so that you could, in fact, start, a fire if you needed to cook something or whatever. Yeah.
If it was safe.
And but not on the living room floor. That wouldn't work. And Go ahead.
Just one other thing very quickly. People tend to think about having supplies. It's another important thing to do in your home. Keep all your important documents in one place. So should you have to leave immediately or suddenly, you've got that stuff with you. You know, licenses, certificates, insurance, things like that. You want to be able to take that with you.
Great point to mention there. And then we're about out of time here, and it's just like this flies back by so quickly. And there's so much more that we could talk about. We'll have to do this one again. And I think maybe we should plan to do this again in a couple of more months when people aren't thinking about we just had an earthquake. Hopefully we won't have another earthquake between now and then. But that way we can talk a little bit more about some of the other things that people can do and how they should get themselves ready for circumstances, okay? Want the folks out there to know that if you have any thoughts or questions for either of these gentlemen, you can send an email to us at info@referencepointtv.com, and we'll certainly get that information out. Or if you have any suggestions for any other topics that you think you might like to hear, let us know what you're thinking out there in TV land. So, Lynn, Mark, I very much appreciate your presence here today and bringing the material and showing us what we should do, and then for explaining what the programs are like in the area here. We very much appreciate that, and I'm sure the folks out there do too. So again, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time on Reference Point.